It has long been confirmed that Adolf Hitler was responsible for the Holocaust, which led to the genocide of approximately 6 million Jews during World War II. We know about the infamous atrocities at places like Treblinka, Balzac, Sobibor. But here's a question you might not have considered. How did one king kill more people than Hitler and get away with it? Today, we're going to be looking at Leopold II of Belgium. Now, if that name doesn't ring a bell, maybe his image will. How does this guy look? Kind of regal, right? Maybe even distinguished, benevolent even. That is exactly what Leopold wanted people to see. He was a master of public perception. He made sure that everyone saw him as a great humanitarian, a man on a godlike mission to bring light and progress to the darkness of the African jungle. But beneath that guise, he was a monster. During his reign as the king of the Congo Free State, a brutal regime in Central Africa, he oversaw the torture, mutilation, and murder of millions of people. You heard that right, millions. He was so prolific at killing people, so clinically efficient at it, that he beat Hitler, who only managed to kill around 6 million people. That means Leopold killed more people than Hitler. So let's talk about how he got away with it. We'll start in the early 1800s when most of Africa was still wild and untamed, or at least it was in the eyes of European powers. This is where Leopold comes in. Like all wealthy Europeans at the time, he had an itch to colonize and industrialize some poor, helpless land. And he found the perfect place in the Congo River Basin, an area larger than Western Europe, full of natural resources and unlucky enough to be targeted by Leopold. His plan was simple. He would claim the region as his own private colony and then use its people and resources to make himself richer and more powerful than every other king in Europe. Now, because he couldn't just walk into the heart of Africa and declare himself emperor of everything, he created a clever ruse. In 1885, he founded the independent state of the Congo. On paper, it was a sovereign nation, an equal among equals in the eyes of Europe. And Leopold was its king. He ruled over 8 million people in an area roughly the size of the United States east of the Mississippi River. Of course, those natives didn't know any of that. They were living in small villages, growing crops and herding cattle. To them, their lives were very simple. They didn't know they were about to become slaves. And to Leopold, they were nothing but resources. He envisioned the Congo as a massive rubber plantation. Rubber trees, which naturally grow in the Amazon rainforest, were in high demand in Europe for their elasticity and durability. At the time, however, Brazilian supplies were drying up due to disease, creating a massive shortage in the market. To solve this problem, Leopold decided to import the rubber seeds to the Congo and force the local population to tap the trees and ship the rubber back to Europe. Of course, tapping rubber trees is hard work, and the Congolese villagers weren't familiar with the process. But that didn't matter to Leopold. He forced them to learn anyway, or else. If they failed to meet their quota each week, entire villages would burn to the ground. Men, women, and children would be beaten and mutilated. Those who tried to flee would be hunted down and punished even harder. It was a reign of terror, an era of unimaginable horror. Here are just some of the things that happened under Leopold's rule. Children's hands were severed to make it easier for them to pick up the tools needed to harvest the rubber. An estimated 10 to 15 million Congolese people died of starvation, disease, exhaustion, torture, or were simply murdered. Women were held hostage as sexual slaves, tortured with electric currents, forced to crawl through the mud on all fours. Starvation was used as punishment. Whipping was common. People's lips were cut off if they resisted working the rubber fields. Their skulls were crushed with hammers, their limbs torn off and boiled, their skin flayed alive. Human heads were hung on poles as warning signs to others. Babies were ripped apart and thrown into the river. And those who complained of being overworked or mistreated were locked in cages without food or water. Leopold was in it for the money, but he was also in it for the recognition. He loved to travel, play the part of the world's greatest humanitarian. And when he returned home after each trip, he made sure to tell everyone about his amazing work. He organized massive rallies in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, inviting everyone from diplomats to journalists to academics. He gave big speeches, showed impressive slideshows, told stories of his amazing accomplishments. Everyone who attended these events went home feeling inspired, feeling like they witnessed something truly special. But behind the scenes, things were going horribly wrong. Overworked, underpaid and fed lies by Leopold's agents, the Belgian employees were completely overwhelmed and underprepared. There were protests and riots and even acts of sabotage. Leopold responded with even more violence and oppression. He built huge fortresses guarded by armed soldiers, and he flooded the Congo with brutal police forces. As time passed, word began to leak out about what was happening in the Congo. First, it was just rumors, whispers in the wind. But soon, the leaks became streams, turning into rivers, then raging waterfalls that could no longer be ignored. Journalists and activists started sounding the alarm. Here's just a tiny sampling of headlines from around the world. Meanwhile, back in the Congo, the rivers of blood kept flowing. In 1908, the pressure finally became too much. Belgium forcibly took the Congo from Leopold, ending his reign of terror. Sadly, though, he lived another year, dying in 1909 at the age of 64 from a stroke. He spent his final days at his royal palace in Brussels, completely alone. Not a single person came to visit him. Not a single person cared that he was dying. All they wanted was for him to die. And ultimately, that's what happened. The monster who killed more people than Hitler died a free man. So now we come to the question we posed at the beginning. How did he get away with it? There are three main factors. The first is propaganda. From the moment he took control of the Congo, Leopold carefully cultivated an image of himself as a great humanitarian. He plastered the walls of Brussels with propaganda posters detailing his amazing work in Africa. He wrote articles, gave interviews, even hired streetcars to drive around the city blaring his message. Basically, he did everything he could to get people on his side. And for the most part, it worked. Most people believed his story. They thought he was doing amazing work. The second reason Leopold was able to get away with it for so long was the state of colonialism in Africa at the time. In the early 1900s, most European powers saw colonies as liabilities, burdens, rather than assets. They were expensive to maintain and rarely turned a profit. For this reason, many countries reduced or even ended their colonial programs. But not Belgium. For Belgium, the Congo was a gold mine. It supplied the country with valuable resources and cheap labor. For this reason, Belgium was more than happy to support Leopold's regime. They knew what he was doing, but they didn't care. They were making too much money. The third reason Leopold was able to get away with it for so long is probably the most surprising. It's the fact that he actually owned the land outright. As crazy as it sounds, there were no checks or balances on his power. He was a king without a kingdom. He was a monarch of a private colony. Technically, he wasn't even a colonial ruler. He was a landowner. And landowners do whatever they want. Yes, he had to answer to Belgium, but Belgium was only interested in the money. As long as Leopold kept the profits rolling in, Belgium didn't care what he did. They knew what he was doing. They just didn't care. Leopold was able to get away with killing more people than Hitler because he was hidden away in Africa. No one ever visited the Congo. While he was king, no one ever witnessed his brutality firsthand. He was able to live in a bubble, shielded from the outside world by his wealth, his power, and the dense jungles of the Congo. And now it's time for our community question. Do you think Leopold was ever truly sorry for what he did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.